Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Heroux, and I'm one of the organizers of the 2021 Collegeville Workshop on Scientific Software, with an emphasis on software teams. And today we have Hannah Cohoon and Fan, who are both, would you call yourself social scientists? Is that fair?
I would say that. Social scientist,
okay.
information scientist.
Information scientists, thank you very much. Who are both at the University of Texas at Austin. And it's delightful to have them participate in our workshop because they bring a whole other branch of science to the conversation that to me has become fascinating the past 5 or 10 years, to apply scientific method to people in a way that people like Hannah and Fan have skills in that I don't have skills. And so it's delightful to be able to collaborate and discuss with them. Maybe say a few things about yourselves, each of you, and then I understand you have some slides you want to share with us that give us some nice detail, and so we'll move to the slides after your introduction. So go ahead.
Okay. I'm Hannah Cohoon. I'm a doctoral student at the School of Information at UT Austin, and I've been interested in how science changes, and in particular, I've been looking at technology in science, and so with our advisor, James Howison, we've been studying scientific software projects and how they achieve sustainability.
Thank you. Yeah. How about you, Fan?
Yeah, so I'm also a doctoral student, like Hannah already introduced you. I worked with Hannah for a long time, and also with our advisor, James Howison. I have been studying the organizing of technical work, and especially in the open source software development context and the science context. And my recent interest has been in software ecosystem and things like such.
Very good. Thank you very much. So go ahead if you want to start displaying some slides, and
sure.
We'll hear what you have to say.
So while I pull these up, because I can't find PowerPoint. Let me see. There we go. You see PowerPoint?
Yeah, looking
great.
Good.
So we've been studying how scientific software projects pursue sustainability, and in particular through peer production. We call peer production communities when other people might call them open source communities. And that's because we're talking about the way that they're doing the work. So we would say that an open source is referring to the license, but peer production is talking about the fact that a group of peers is working together on a piece of software. So that's where that title comes from. And funding agencies like NSF think that peer production is a good way to pursue sustainability. And so they've been funding software projects to do that. But in studying how software projects become peer production communities, you have to consider what were they before. So the first step in this study was looking at content online. We visited software projects funded by NSF. We visited their online websites and tried to learn about them. And then we saw that there are different kinds of communities or organizations that create scientific software. And of course, one of the ones that we see is peer production communities. And so we just have an example, a fake website here, but it covers all the bases. So a peer production community has a name, and they say they are a community. They're very explicit about this. They have an online presence. They're focused on one thing, the software, and they clearly invite people to contribute. So there's a direct extension of an invitation to you, the reader of the website. Unlike some other kinds of organizations, they don't feature publications, and there's no revenue stream. Other types of organizations that we saw varied widely. So some were not long-term organizations. They were more transient, and my slides are moving slowly, but if it goes back up to an author group, yeah, this is a a short-term collaboration among researchers. So they don't have a name, they don't identify as a community, they don't have a website, and we can only really learn about them through papers and posters. Usually they're interested in a single thing. They won't extend an invitation to join their non-existent organization, and they don't have a revenue stream. In contrast, businesses are what you would expect. They have a way to get money, they have a revenue stream, they're focused on a specific thing to sell you. They don't invite contributions, but they do have a strong identity and a name and a website. Labs are other kinds of organizations that we saw that produce scientific software. So you can see here again a fake lab website that has the lab members. It's focused on the PI. They might have different interests that link to different pieces of software or different ongoing projects. And they won't really invite contributions, but they might invite you to join the lab. They always share publications and they don't have revenue streams. We also saw what we called tool groups, and these are similar to peer production communities. They have a name, website, singular interests, but they don't invite contributions. So you can access the software, it could even be open source, but it's not peer production because it's not a community behind it, an open community behind it. So we looked at how these different groups might move from their original organization or configuration, like a lab or a tool group, to peer production. And we saw that that doesn't happen very often. So we looked at over 100 projects, and you can see on the axis here, we're looking at 8 that transitioned to peer production. Most of those were tool groups, and they did so in these different ways. One way is to change your actual organization and the processes that you have so that you are no longer closed, but invite contributions and that you have a way to take those contributions in. The other way would be a handoff. And a handoff would mean that instead of changing your processes, you're just going to give your code to an organization that already is a peer production community. So you'd surrender your code to this other group. That's a quick summary. We can answer questions or go in more depth or whatever you'd like.
Yeah, thank you very much. So one of the things I recall from your white paper, and I don't know if I think you can take the slides down, that way we can see a little better. One of the things I recall from your white paper is that team you were talking about NSF SI2 projects, remind me what SI stands for. I always forget. Is it something innovation for? Anyway, you know, right?
Software infrastructure for
Thank
sustained
you.
innovation. I have to look it up.
I should recall that because I had a little money from NSF at St. John's for this, but I forget. So thank you very much. So you talked about projects with SI2 funding and how, and specifically, can you go into a little bit more detail about the teams there and the characterization that you saw?
Mm-hmm. And Fan, if you're looking to.
Okay.
Yeah. Please.
So when we're doing this project, so we have kind of a go to understanding how the sustainability is like for scientific software and scientific software projects. And so the one perspective we take is to looking at how these scientific software projects funded by SI2 are organized, because it is not easy to manage a software projects, and you might have more to say about this. And when you add to this, the work of managing and organizing projects to scientists who are not, initially natively software engineers, and how the work would look like, what kind of frictions and the challenges that they have to deal with. That's kind of one intention, I would say, of doing this research. And to put it in the software team context, I would say you can basically understand this is how scientific software teams are like in the SI2 program. Some look like, a collaboration of scientists. Some look like a two group more focused, and some look like, an open source community.
Mhm.
So this is, I see how our research is speaking to the software team themes. And I don't know if Hannah has other things to add or Mike have.
Yeah, just to characterize them a little bit more. So like we came up with these different types of organizations or recognized them, but the projects themselves, they are from lots of different disciplines. We saw some from physics, some from geosciences, chemistry. There's a lot of modeling software. And then there's some focus on algorithms and some focus on the tools themselves. There's a lot of diversity in what SI2 funded and the projects that we were looking at. Common to almost all of them was the same infrastructure. Almost everyone's on GitHub.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So if I were just getting started doing a software project, and I had anticipated that I would want to move to peer production, in other words, open source with community members contributing to what I'm doing. I'm not paying them; they're doing it because there's some value to them. And they see maybe participation is in the greater good as a noble cause, right? That might be another reason. Do you have some advice for let's say I were to get started doing that? Would you have some advice based on what you've learned from these analyses?
Yeah. So first steps are a little bit obvious, and they're what most people take. You set up your online infrastructure. You need a place for people to go to learn about the project, to know how they can help. And they need to feel welcomed, which is why those peer production communities, they're full of exclamation points, and they really tell you over and over again, we want you. But you can't just say these things. You have to back it up with your own time and effort. And so what that might look like might mean that you are not going to be in a code development position. You might be looking for these outside contributors. You might be looking for users to give you feedback. You might be looking for grants. And so, I mean, just starting out, one thing to recognize is that your role in starting this community might not be software developer. It might be much more like project manager.
Yeah, interesting. Very good. Fanya, how about you? Any other insights?
Yeah, so echoing Hannah a little bit, my first suggestion would be prepared for the work. We also interviewed a lot of projects through this research project. And one thing we learned that it is very costly to receive a pull request to merge a pull request on GitHub. You need to go through a lot of conversations, and especially in the science context, if someone who submitted a pull request is a student who is not really specializing in software work, there has to be a lot of mentoring work going on. Sometimes a pull request goes on for years. So I would say once we learned that, so everyone is prepared for if you're going to organize a community, then those are the work that you need to count into your plan. Making your at least a time budget for that and be ready for onboarding outside contributors, more members.
Yeah, very interesting comment. So I mean, every project, whether it's formal or not, has a business model. That's what I think of it as, right? How do you conduct yourself? Where do your costs come? Where do your funds come from? And that kind of thing. So what I hear you saying is that if you're going to have a peer production community, you need to be prepared to invest on the other side of receiving those contributions. That's what I took away from your comments, and I can see that. In fact, I recall a conversation with Wolfgang Bangert, who is leads the Deal 2 project, which was one of these SI2 projects. He and I had some work together on it. He says that much of his time nowadays is spent reviewing other people's code. And so that's the big time investment on his part for accepting those contributions from other outside members of the community. Oh, very good. Well, thank you for sharing your ideas. And just so everyone knows, there's a white paper submitted to the workshop on peer production communities. So you can get more detail from that paper as well. And we look forward to the live portion of the meeting next week on July 20th through 22nd. And thank you very much for your participation in the workshop. Thank you. And thank you very much for focusing on our community as information scientists. I think it's pretty obvious that your contributions to our efforts to improve how scientific software is developed and used are very important. And I think will only grow in importance as we become more interdependent, the scientific community. So being able to learn how to work both effectively and efficiently with each other can benefit from your input. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah.